So I want you to imagine a television show that deals with, like, profound existential despair.
Oh, setting the stage heavy right out of the gate.
I mean, I have to. We're talking about the terrifying social isolation of a sudden cancer diagnosis and the crushing, confusing weight of survivor's guilt after a massive disaster.
Right. And you'd think we were talking about a premium cable drama.
Exactly. But imagine that the protagonist experiencing all of this heavy psychological trauma is, well, an 8-year-old cartoon aardvark wearing a yellow sweater.
It sounds completely absurd when you frame it that way.
It really does.
But honestly, that contrast is exactly what makes the source material we were looking at today so incredibly significant. I mean, we tend to view children's media through a very specific protective lens.
Yeah, we expect a padded room, right? Like a completely sanitized map of the world.
Precisely. You turn on a cartoon with talking animals, and the baseline expectation is that the biggest conflict will be someone losing a favorite toy.
Or a simple playground squabble where everyone learns to share.
Right. The moral is cleanly delivered in 22 minutes, and everybody hugs.
But today, we are doing a deep dive into a stack of video essays and analyses detailing how one specific beloved animated series, Arthur, just entirely tore up that sanitized map.
And subverted the entire medium in the process. It's wild. Children's media often serves as a child's first real roadmap for navigating the trauma of the real world.
Yeah.
And most shows just, point out the landmarks from a safe distance. But this show threw the kids directly into the train, trusting them to navigate the mud.
Okay, let's unpack. Because diving into these sources completely shattered my own childhood memories of this show.
I bet.
The goal for you listening right now is to explore how the seemingly simple universe of aardvarks, bunnies, and monkeys navigated grief, PTSD, chronic illness, and the complex psychological weight of societal expectations.
All without ever talking down to its young audience.
Exactly. So we are jumping right into the deep end here, starting with the most universal, unavoidable fear of all, mortality.
The big one.
We've got two very different lenses of grief in the sources, the death of a pet and the death of a grandparent. Let's start with DW, the little sister, and her pet bird, Spank.
Yeah, so what's crucial to understand about the Spanky narrative is how the show establishes a baseline of mundane, slightly annoying reality before it shatters it.
Right, because Spanky isn't some idealized, perfect companion.
Not at all. He's a nuisance. He bites Arthur at the pet shop. He ruins shoelaces. Arthur explicitly admits he only likes the bird when its beak is closed.
Which is such a real sibling reaction.
It is, and the writers do this intentionally to ground the relationship in reality so the loss feels real, not melodramatic.
And then the shift happens, Spanky gets sick, and the visual contrast the animators use here is just brilliant.
Oh, the window scene?
Yeah. Outside the window, there are baby birds chirping, this vivid, noisy image of new beginning. But inside, Spanky, frail and silent.
It's a stark contrast.
And Dida Yu, in her poignant innocence, tries to fix it the only way a child knows how. She makes the bird a cup of...
She puts honey and a cough drop in it.
Yeah. She genuinely believes a warm drink can cure mortality. And then, while she's out of the room, Spanky dies.
It's so sudden.
It is. When she finds him, she takes him to her dad, who happens to be happily baking pastries, and she asks, why won't Spanky wake up?
And her father gives it to her straight. He doesn't say Spanky went to sleep or went to a farm. He says Spanky is dead.
Which is heavy, but necessary.
Right, but we have to look at this through the lens of early childhood cognitive development. To a toddler, dead is not a biological absolute. It's an enigma.
Right, they don't get the permanence.
Exactly. According to developmental psychology, children DW's age generally lack the concept of irreversibility.
Which completely explains her reaction. She tilts her head and asks, when will Spanky stop being dead?
It just gets you.
It really does, because she thinks death is a temporary state, like being hungry or taking a nap. She tells her dad that Spanky just needs to drink his tea.
And then, jarringly, Arthur bursts into the room.
Oh my gosh, yes. He takes one look and bluntly asks, did something die?
It is such a stark, almost comedic contrast.
It is, but it perfectly captures the developmental gap between siblings.
Yeah, Arthur is older. He grasps the permanence of death. His bluntness isn't malicious, it's just factual.
But it sharply highlights the fragile emotional space DW is in. The family holds a funeral. Arthur apologizes for telling the bird to shut up. They share memories.
But the communal ritual isn't enough for DW.
No, it's not. She takes an old tin can, puts the wilted gray flowers in it, and creates this sacred space. She is trying to hold time.
But time refuses to stand still. Which brings us to the symbolism of the toad.
The toad. Okay, so DW looks in Spanky's memorial can, and there is a toad just sitting there.
Right.
She shoos it away, but this toad becomes relentless. It invades her mornings. It shows up at her preschool, literally jumping onto her teacher's lesson plan during show and tell.
It follows her home, pushing her dropped purse away from a storm drain.
It even gets into her bedroom, scattering her toys. Wild.
The psychological utility of that toad is fascinating. You see, when we experience profound grief, our immediate instinct is to demand that the world pause.
We want everything to stop and acknowledge our pain.
Exactly. But the world doesn't pause. The toad represents the relentless, unyielding nature of life pushing forward.
And DW is irritated by it because she is blinded by sorrow.
Yeah, she misjudges its actions, thinking it's trying to steal her purse when it's actually saving it from the drain because grief warps our perception of the present.
It isn't until the toad jumps out the window and is almost run over by a neighbor's lawnmower that her perspective snaps back.
Right, she suddenly fears losing the toad, too.
That visceral fear of a new loss forces her to accept a new bond. But the show doesn't just look at toddler. It scales up to an older child's perspective with Francine, who loses her grandmother, her bubby.
And this shifts the focus from the confusion of mortality to the agonizing social isolation of grief.
And the specific vehicle for that isolation is her best friend, Muffy, who steps in with a textbook display of what we now call toxic positivity.
Muffy is wild in this episode.
She really is. Francine is quietly, and Muffy decides to throw her a massive surprise party. We're talking balloon, huge strawberry vanilla.
And Muffy dictating the mood, yelling, "I want smiles, people!"
When that fails, she takes Francine to a pampered Princess Day spa and slathers mud on her face.
Think about the last time a friend came to you with heavy news. Be honest. Did you sit with them in the silence? Or did you immediately try to silver lining it just to make yourself feel less uncomfortable?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly what Muffy is doing.
Muffy treating Francine's grief with a spa day is exactly like trying to fix a deep software glitch by putting a sparkly new phone case on the device.
That is a perfect analogy.
She's aggressively managing the exterior because she's entirely unequipped to code the interior. Muffy even reads a magazine article about the 5 stages of grief and tries to clinically categorize Francine's annoyance as anger.
It's a defense mechanism. She isn't listening, she's managing.
Precisely.
But I want to push back on this a little, though.
Go ahead.
Is it really fair to expect an 8-year-old kid like Muffy to know how to handle profound existential... I mean, isn't she just trying to be a good friend with the limited she has? We are labeling her behavior toxic, but her intentions are pure.
Her intentions are to alleviate her own discomfort, not Francine's pain. And that's a crucial distinction, whether you are 8 or 80.
Okay, that's...
The brilliance of the episode is that it acknowledges Muffy's lack of tools, and then it teaches her and the audience how to acquire them.
Right. It takes George, who is notoriously quiet and observant, to teach Muffy the difference between sympathy.
Muffy catches Francine talking to George over hummus at the Sugar Bowl, and she's baffled.
George explains he isn't offering advice. He asks Muffy if she's ever lost anything.
And Muffy remembers her first pet, a hamster named Snowball. The memories still stink.
That is the moment of breakthrough.
Sympathy is observing someone in a deep hole and saying, "I'm sorry you're down there. Here's a balloon."
And empathy is climbing down into the hole with...
Exactly. Empathy requires vulnerability. Once Muffy taps into her own stored memory of loss, she finally understands the assignment.
She goes to Francine's apartment, hands her a photo from a time they all went to see a movie called 5,000 Explosions in a Supernova, and she just sits there on the bed.
No music, no cake.
She stops talking, and she listens. It teaches the audience that you absolutely cannot fast forward through someone else's grief.
No, you can't.
But the show doesn't just stop at sudden death. It transitions into the terrifying, murky uncertainty of chronic, potentially terminal illness.
Specifically, the episode where the beloved school lunch lady, Mrs. McGrady, is diagnosed with cancer.
Handling oncology in a children's cartoon without resorting to euphemisms or magical cures is a massive narrative risk.
Huge. But the writers began by grounding the trauma in a disruption of routine. Mrs. McGrady is gone.
She is replaced by a substitute chef named Skip Bitterman, who serves this bubbling, viscous green goulash.
Buster, who literally keeps a school lunch almanac, knows immediately that the natural order is broken. He predicts it should be baked ziti because it's 2 days past a full moon.
The humor of the gross goulash really disarms the viewer. You're laughing at the green slime, and then back in class, Mr. Ratburn stands at the front of the room and he drops the hammer.
He really does.
He doesn't say she's under the weather. He doesn't say she went away for a rest. He says, point blank, Mrs. McGrady is sick. She has...
Dropping the word cancer into a classroom setting forces a spectrum of trauma responses from the children. And the writers systematically segment these reactions to mirror how adults process illness in a community.
Let's break those down. Muffy, once again, goes into deep performative denial.
She drags Francine to a high-end store to buy expensive ties for her father's birthday, aggressively focusing on materialism to assert control over a chaotic world.
Right, and when Francine tries to ground her, pointing out that Mrs. McGrady has cancer and might not get better, explicitly mentioning that her own grandfather died of it, Muffy calls her negative.
Muffy says, She never gets sick, as if Mrs. McGrady's past health is a contractual guarantee of her future.
It's such a common reaction, and Francine falls into exact opposite trauma response, existential despair.
Yeah, she is playing goalie in a soccer game, a ball flies right past her, and she barely tracks it.
She tells Binky, what's the point if we win or lose? It's not like it's going to make Grady better.
The illness feels so massive, so insurmountable, that everything else in her life is rendered trivial and meaningless.
Then you have Arthur and DW, who represent the instinct to act, even if that action is incredible.
They visit Mrs. McGrady at her house, bringing jars of soup.
And DW shows up wearing a surgical mask. She is terrified of catching cancer.
Which is a brilliant detail.
Yeah.
Children often over-apply germ theory. If you catch a cold from someone sneezing, why wouldn't you catch cancer the same way?
Right.
The conceptual mechanics of cellular mutation are completely beyond.
But Mrs. McGrady's response is so graceful. She doesn't shame DW or laugh at the mask, takes out a sketch pad and draws a picture.
She explains that the body is like a healthy garden growing beautiful flowers. Those are the normal cells. But sometimes a few weeds top.
And right now, the medicine she's taking is working really hard to pull those weeds out.
It's an analogy that explains the mechanics of chemotherapy in a way that is visual, honest, and oddly hopeful without making false promises.
It gives the child a conceptual framework that replaces the terror of the unknown.
However, the episode also explores the desperate human desire for a magical fix.
Oh, right, Francine.
Yeah, Francine feels so helpless that she dreams of exploring an uncharted rainforest to find a magical, undiscovered red flower to cure the disease.
She wants to be the savior who fixes the unfixable.
Exactly. This hero complex leads her to email Lance Armstrong, who was, at the time the episode was produced, a world-famous cancer survivor.
Now, we have to talk about the Lance Armstrong controversy because the real-world history of this episode is wild.
It really is.
This poignant, critically acclaimed episode originally aired in 2009, but in 2012, PBS quietly banned it from their rerun rotation.
And they didn't ban it because the cancer storyline was too dark or upsetting for kids.
No. They pulled it purely because Lance Armstrong was engulfed in his real-life doping scandal and was stripped of his Tour de France title.
The episode sat locked in a vault until 2021, when they actually reanimated the exact same episode but digitally scrubbed Lance Armstrong out.
And swapped him for a fictional pro wrestler named Uncle Slam. So crazy.
The archival history is fascinating, but looking purely at the narrative, the celebrity cameo, whether Armstrong or Uncle Slam, serves a vital psychological purpose for Francine.
Right, because the celebrity doesn't offer her a magical rainforest cure.
No, he tells her that he survived because of science, doctors, and the grueling support of friends and family. He redirects her frantic energy.
He tells her that being a good friend is doing.
And that redirects Francine into organizing the pedal for a cure bike race. She channels her despair into tangible community action.
But the emotional climax of the episode doesn't belong to Fran's grand public gesture. It belongs to Muffy's quiet.
Muffy finally works up the nerve to visit Mrs. McGrady with Arthur and DW.
Yeah.
She brings a fancy gift basket, trying to keep things superficial.
But then DW spills a chocolate candy on the floor. Before Mrs. McGrady, who is exhausted and wearing a bandana because she's lost her hair, can bend down to clean it, Muffy jumps up.
She grabs paper towels and scrubs the floor.
Muffy is confronted with the physical reality of the illness. She realizes that cancer is, as Mrs. McGrady told her earlier, no walk in the park.
The profound insight here is the demystification of caregiving.
Muffy comes back later when Mrs. McGrady is away at a doctor's. Muffy, Arthur, and DW put on pink rubber gloves, wash the dishes, take out the trash, vacuum the carpets, and leave a bowl of fresh oranges on.
Francine's dream of finding a magical cure shifts to the acceptance that small, deeply unglamorous acts of service like scrubbing dried soup off a bowl are the actual acts of heroism.
It's like saying, we see you, we're here for you, and we care enough to take out your trash.
Exactly. We see how an individual illness ripples through a community. But what happens when the destruction isn't localized to a single person's biology?
Yeah, what happens when a massive, incomprehensible event shakes the physical foundation of the entire...
That brings us to how the show tackled collective trauma. And we're going to start with an episode called April 9th, which aired in late 2002.
Roughly a year after the September 11th attack.
Right. Now, obviously, a children's cartoon isn't going to show terrorism. Instead, the writers used a devastating fire that destroys the elementary school as a localized metaphor for a massive, incomprehensible disaster.
It is a masterpiece of psychological storytelling because it shatters the myth that there is a single correct way to react to a catastrophe.
The writers split the trauma into 4 distinctly different character perspectives.
Let's break those down, starting with Sue Ellen.
Okay.
She loses her backpack in the fire, and inside that backpack was her special journal containing a postcard from her pen pal in Bolivia.
She has had this journal since the 1st grade.
Right, she is grieving the loss of something entirely irreplaceable. Muffy, trying to help, goes to a stationery store and buys her an $8 faux velvet replacement journal with a stunning pin.
Muffy completely misses the point. Sue Ellen represents the grief over the loss of the physical past. A new journal doesn't replace the history etched into the old.
Then, on a completely different emotional spectrum, you have Arthur.
Arthur represents acute anxiety and the fear of future loss.
Arthur's father was catering a breakfast at the school that morning. Arthur sees the smoke, the rushing firefighters, and he knows his dad is inside that burning building.
Even after his dad emerges completely safe and unharmed, Arthur's worldview is permanently destabilized.
His dad gets a new catering gig at an aquarium, and while Arthur is relieved it isn't a school, he still begs his dad home, pretending to have a stomachache.
The fear is clinging.
And this is where the writing elevates to a clinical level. Arthur's dad sits him down and shares a story from his own childhood.
When he was young, his mother, Grandma Thora, was in a minor car accident. She was physically fine, but the event triggered an intense psychological fear in Arthur's dad every time she drove.
He developed a compulsive coping.
He tells Arthur that he used to crumble up paper and shoot it into a wastebasket, telling himself that if he made more shots than he missed, his mom would come home safely.
Wait, he developed an OCD ritual to keep his mother safe.
Precisely. It is known clinically as magical thinking. It's a classic anxiety response where the human brain tries to exert control over a chaotic, uncontrollable universe through repetitive ritual.
Like, if I tap the doorframe 3 times, the plane won't crash.
Or if I make these wastebasket shots, my mom won't die.
Wow.
His father explains that one day he forgot to shoot the paper, and Grandma Thora still came home safely. He looks Arthur in the eye and explicitly tells him, "It's my job to worry about you, not the other way around."
He relieves Arthur of the impossible psychological burden of trying to keep his parents safe. That is incredibly heavy for an after-school cartoon.
It is.
But the perspective that really caught me off guard was Buster's.
Oh, Buster's reaction is so complex.
Right. Buster's alarm didn't go off. He overslept and missed the entire fire. When he finally shows up, everyone is visibly traumatized, the building is charred, and Buster feels this bizarre mix of survivor's guilt and extreme FOMO.
He admits he feels nothing, and he's terrified that something is fundamentally broken inside him because he isn't crying like the others.
Buster represents the periphery of a tragedy. He represents the millions of people who watch a disaster unfold but weren't physically there.
And to compensate for his perceived emotional inadequacy, when the kids get transferred to a temporary school, Mighty Mountain, Buster starts.
He starts exaggerating the fire to the new kids, making up wild stories about dodging walls of flame to get attention.
His exaggeration is a desperate attempt to claim a piece of the collective narrative because he feels excluded from the communal bonding that trauma often creates.
But the most severe, chilling reaction belongs to Binky.
Binky always acts tough. He tells everyone it takes more than a little fire to scare him.
But internally, he is experiencing genuine post-traumatic stress disorder.
The depiction of an amygdala hijack in this episode is startlingly accurate. Binky starts hallucinating smoke in the renovated teacher's lounge.
He becomes hypervigilant. He is so desperate to regain a sense of safety that he intentionally pulls a false fire alarm just to test the local firefighters' response time.
He stands there with a stopwatch and clocks them at exactly 3 minutes and 29 seconds.
He needs quantifiable data to prove he won't burn to death.
He is completely paralyzed by flashbacks and refuses to go back inside the school.
And the resolution doesn't come from a teacher or a parent. It comes from Mr. Frensky, Francine's dad, who finds Binky picking up litter in the park as punishment for pulling the alarm.
Mr. Frensky reveals a piece of his own history. He used to be a volunteer firefighter.
He doesn't tell Binky to man up or that his fears are irrational.
He validates Binky's terror. He admits that fires terrified him too, and explains that the only way the fear shrinks is by bringing it into the light, by talking about it.
The show normalizes the absolute necessity of verbally processing trauma.
They tackle a man-made disaster brilliantly, and then they apply a similar lens to natural disasters in the Hurricane Sadia.
Right. A massive hurricane, described as being as big as France, is barreling toward Elwood City. And we get to see how intellectual preparation absolutely does not protect your mental.
The focus here shifts to Brain, the quintessential logic and science kid.
Brain views the approaching hurricane purely as a fascinating meteorological event. He tracks it on a custom touchscreen weather globe he built himself.
He helps his dad board up their family ice cream shop, operating with total confidence in their structural preparation.
They use the right plywood, the right nails, the right physics.
But a storm doesn't care about.
No, it doesn't. Despite their perfect logic, a massive tree crashes directly into their shop, completely destroying, while the neighboring buildings are utterly untouched.
Brain just breaks. He stares at the rubble of his family's livelihood and asks, why them?
His dad pulls his smashed, beloved weather globe out of the rubble, and Brain just throws it in the trash. It's a total rejection of science.
In the following days, he develops severe anxiety. If the wind just rustles the trees outside his window, Brain completely panics, jumping out of bed to physically barricade his windows.
He starts losing his memory, forgetting his history books for Mr. Ratburn's class. He is spiraling.
What the writers are illustrating here is the shattering of the just world hypothesis. Brain believed that if you do everything right, you are safe.
The randomness of the destruction violates his core belief in an ordered universe.
This is why his parents make the crucial decision to take him to a therapist, Dr. Paula.
I want to spend time on this therapy scene because depicting pediatric therapy in a cartoon in the early 2000s, huge.
It was groundbreaking.
Brain walks into the office totally defensive, arms crossed, immediately declaring, "I'm not crazy."
That line addresses the pervasive stigma of mental health head on, and Dr. Paula's approach is masterful.
She sits him down, bypasses his nickname, calls him by his real name, Alan, and says, "If a hurricane destroyed my office, I'd be a little jumpy too."
She completely normalizes his physiological response. Once his defenses are lowered, he admits his core fear.
Right, if the storm could destroy the store when they did everything exactly right, what's stopping the wind from destroying his house or his pool?
And Dr. Paula doesn't offer him empty, toxic positive reassurance. She doesn't promise him another storm won't.
Instead, she teaches him a practical grounding tech breathing exercise.
Brain is resistant at first, scoffing that he knows how to breathe. He's been doing it for 9 years.
Natural. But she explains the psychology behind it. She tells him that fear acts like a bully in your head, hijacking your nervous system.
By focusing deliberately on your breath, you are forcing the parasympathetic nervous system to engage, which tells your brain that you are not currently in physical danger.
She even shares her own history of performance anxiety as a singer to show that adults battle the same bully.
It completely demystifies the therapeutic process for any child watching.
Meanwhile, the hurricane affects the other kids differently. Muffy's mansion floods slightly, and her family loses power, forcing them into a public shelter.
Muffy is miserable, complaining about people snoring and missing her walk-in closet.
But she meets a girl named Kay, the self-proclaimed mayor of the shelter, who gives Muffy earplugs and teaches her to slide down the linoleum hallways in her socks.
When Kay later takes Muffy to see her house, Muffy realizes Kay's home is completely destroyed. The roof is literally torn off.
Muffy is struck completely silent.
It forces Muffy out of her solipsistic bubble.
And LaDonna faces a different kind of psychological defense mechanism. Her father is in the Army Corps of Engineers and is deployed to fix an overflowing river, meaning he will miss her 9th birthday.
Rather than face the crushing disappointment, LaDonna decides to cancel her birthday entirely.
She tries to assert control by rejecting the event before it can hurt her.
But the community steps in. Arthur channels his post-storm anxiety into creating a website called Help After Sadie to reunite lost pets.
And he helps throw LaDonna a surprise party in a repaired treehouse.
We see how a massive storm shatters Brain's physical illusion of control. But what happens when the storm isn't outside your window, but inside your own body?
Right. That loss of control is exactly what Buster faces when we move into the episodes dealing with invisible battles.
Yes, shifting from a loud, visible hurricane to the silent, internal struggles of asthma and stuttering. Let's examine Buster's asthma diet.
The writers construct an incredibly clever setup here. It starts with the kids playing a game called Dangerous Snig in the park with butterfly nets.
DW wants to join in, but she accidentally runs through a patch of poison ivy.
The boys instantly panic and run away, screaming from her, establishing this intense, visceral fear of
DW is forced to wear a hockey mask and oven mitts just to go to the sugar bowl because she's terrified people will run from her.
She calls herself Otis. It's funny, but it establishes how quickly kids will isolate someone they perceive as infected.
And seeing her hide her face triggers a flashback for Buster. He remembers a rainy day in the treehouse with Arthur, reading old, dusty joke book.
Out of nowhere, Buster starts coughing and suddenly he can't breathe. The animation gets tight, sound design shift.
He later describes the asthma attack to DW using an analogy that blew me away. He says it felt like trying to breathe through a straw that was clogged with a thick milkshake.
It's a brilliant tactile way to explain airway constriction, bronchospasm, and inflammation to a child.
But notice that the core conflict of the episode isn't the biological reality of asthma. It's the social isolation that follows the diagnosis.
Right. Once Buster returns to school, his friends don't understand the condition, so they treat him as either fragile glass or a threat.
The rumor mill starts immediately. When Buster goes to the nurse, Binky assumes he's faking it to skip class, and Francine spots him using his inhaler and assumes he's playing a kazoo.
Arthur becomes suffocatingly overprotective. They are in the cafeteria, and Arthur literally blows powdered sugar off of Buster's donut before letting him eat it, terrified the dust will trigger an attack.
Then during a baseball game, Francine is about to tag Buster out, but she intentionally drops the ball and backs away.
We get a glimpse into her imagination, and she envisions Buster's breath as this dangerous green cloud. She's treating asthma like it's the bubonic plague.
But I have to ask,
Yeah.
aren't the kids just being cautious? If you don't know what asthma is and your friend almost died in a treehouse, isn't blowing the powdered sugar off his donut a sign that you care?
It's a sign of anxiety masquerading as care, and the impact on the recipient is disastrous. Buster realizes his friends no longer see him as a normal kid. They see him as a walking liability.
The social stigma becomes heavier than the physical illness. So what does a child do when they feel ostracized?
They mask. Buster lies. He declares he is magically cured. He takes a dusty math book, sniffs it gently, and pretends nothing happened.
His friends are incredibly relieved, with Francine explicitly saying, "Now I don't have to worry about catching asthma."
Which just proves they learned absolutely nothing. Buster hides his inhaler and tries to play street hockey with a broom and a soccer ball.
He gets winded, the dust kicks up, and he suffers a full-blown attack on the pavement.
He tries to wave it off, gasping, refusing to go to the nurse because he is so deeply ashamed of his own lungs.
When he finally does go, the nurse points out a hard truth. His friends aren't being mean, they're just ignorant.
So Buster takes control of the narrative. He does a science prison. He asks the class to imagine shrinking down and going on a fantastic voyage inside his lungs.
It's a wonderful visual sequence. The classroom transforms into a biological airway. Buster shows them how the walls literally tighten and swell when exposed to triggers like dust and mold, causing the cough.
He demystifies the physiological mechanic. He explicitly states that asthma is not contagious. He says, "I'm still the same old Buster. I just have asthma like I have big ears."
The episode teaches that understanding removes fear. Once they know the mechanics, the social isolation evaporates.
They tackle asthma perfectly, but here's where it gets really. The show tackles an even more hidden, deeply psychological anxiety with Maria's stutter.
Maria is established as the quietest girl in school.
She doesn't raise her hand, she just writes answers down on a whiteboard. Arthur realizes she's so quiet she's impossible to find in hide and seek.
She even dresses as a literal mime for Halloween so she won't be expected to speak.
But then Mr. Ratburn assigns the class to run a live TV news show, and he assigns Maria as the lead reporter.
To a child with a stutter, this assignment isn't just stressful, it is a nightmare scenario. The psychology of a stutter often involves a vicious anticipation.
You know you're going to block on a certain word, and the fear of that block causes neurological...
Which makes the block infinitely worse. Maria confesses her terror to her friend Jenna in the bath. She isn't just shy, she is living in constant, paralyzing fear of public judgment.
So she attempts to game the system. She decides to interview someone who loves to talk so much that Maria won't have to say a single word on camera.
She chooses Muffy.
Oh, the gaslighting of silence in this interview is both hilarious, and Maria sits there physically shaking, holding the microphone, not saying a word.
And Muffy, being Muffy, assumes Maria's silence is this profound psychological journalistic technique designed to get her to open up.
Muffy starts unprompted, confessing all her insecurities, that she's a Gemini, she loves opera, and yes, she knows she can be selfish sometimes, but the pressure of being smart and pretty.
Francine, the director, finally cuts the camera and tells Maria she has to find someone else because this isn't an Oprah therapy.
Maria's silence creates a void, and people like Muffy project their own ego.
But the anxiety follows Maria into her sleep. She has a nightmare where she tries to speak into a camera, but only farm animal sounds come, and her classmates, including Francine, laugh at her.
The fear of humiliation is omnipresent. When the live broadcast finally happens, Maria freezes.
She is so humiliated by her inability to form the word that she runs out of the room and hides in the woodshop, talking only to Goldie, the school hamster, because animals don't demand fluency.
And this is where Mr. Ratburn finds her. He doesn't punish her for running. He listens, and he reveals something amazing. He used to stutter.
He tells her about how he overcame his own block to play Captain Corcoran in a 7th grade production of HMS Pinafore. He tells her she doesn't have to be perfect, she just has to try.
So, weeks later, for the next broadcast, Maria doesn't just do a report. She does a report on stuttering.
She talks about Lewis Carroll, Winston Churchill, and Marilyn Monroe.
And she still stutters during the report. She doesn't suddenly become magically fluent, but she doesn't stop. She speaks through the block.
That is a profound lesson in radical acceptance. The show highlights that true bravery isn't about not having a stutter, but speaking despite the immense physiological and psychological friction.
And that courage to speak the truth leads us directly into how the show examines the opposite, the psychological damage of speaking false.
We move from physical vulnerabilities to the profound pressures created by the people closest to us. Let's look at Buster's white lie.
Buster becomes a chronic people pleaser. He starts telling Arthur whatever he thinks Arthur wants to hear to avoid any form of conflict.
Arthur builds a terrible caveman diorama. It honestly looks like a dust bunny glued to a rock, and Buster praises it as a masterpiece.
Meanwhile, Buster builds a scientifically accurate saber-toothed tiger out of marzipan. Arthur gets a C+B, Buster gets an A.
Then, at a baseball game, Arthur's called out sliding into base. Arthur insists he was safe. Buster immediately agrees, even though Francine points out Arthur was out by a mile.
Now let me play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
Isn't Buster just being polite? If someone's diorama is terrible, why crush their spirit? Aren't white lies the social glue that society functioning? Why are we analyzing an 8-year-old as if he's a gaslighter?
Because there is a vast difference between tact and the total erosion of someone's self-efficacy. Buster's behavior stems from his own anxiety about conflict, but the psychological effect on Arthur is devastating.
Constant unearned praise is a form of unintentional gaslight.
It strips away a person's ability to trust their own self-assessment. Arthur knows his diorama wasn't great. He knows he might have been out at the plate.
But when his best friend relentlessly confirms a false reality, Arthur experiences intense cognitive dissonance. He starts to doubt his own sanity.
It gets so bad that Arthur buys this incredibly ugly, clashing neon shirt that his Uncle Fred brought back from Las Vegas.
Arthur wears it to the ice cream shop, and everyone is staring. Buster, sweating, tells him it looks sweet.
Arthur finally snaps and forces Buster to admit it's horrible, but the damage to their trust is done.
Arthur has a nightmare where he and Buster are cavemen facing a woolly mammoth. Arthur builds a terrible, flimsy spear. Buster praises it as the best spear ever, and when Arthur tries to use it, the spear shatters and the mammoth charges.
In the dream, Buster finally admits, "Spear terrible. Me not want you feel like doofus."
That dream perfectly encapsulates the danger of the echo chamber. If you lie to protect my feelings, you leave me completely defenseless against the woolly mammoths of reality.
The tension climaxes at Arthur's piano recital. Arthur's incredibly nervous. He plays his piece, and afterward, Francine tells him he was great.
But Buster, finally trying to break his cycle of people-pleasing, tells Arthur the truth. He missed a note right at the beginning.
Arthur completely shatters. He accuses Buster of being mean because Arthur has become so accustomed to the sugarcoating that actual objective truth feels like a violent attack.
Thankfully, DW is there to bluntly confirm you played bum 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 bum.
Arthur realizes Buster is right. He apologizes, realizing that the truth might sting in the moment, but it builds the foundation for real trust.
Buster even gives him an edible marzipan piano to make up for it. But speaking of pressure and good intentions warping reality, we have to look at holiday stress.
The special Arthur's Perfect Christmas captures the sheer crushing weight of holiday expectations better than most media aimed at adults.
The central theme of that special is how adult anxieties are seamlessly transferred to children and how the relentless pursuit of an orchestrated perfect holiday inevitably leads to disappointment.
It begins with DW writing her letter to Santa, but she's in a state of sheer panic because she thinks she accidentally wrote Santa Cruz instead of Santa.
She tells Arthur she's only had 4 Christmases in her entire life, so the stakes feel apocalyptic.
When her mother tries to gently manage her expectation, explaining that Santa can't bring everything to everyone, DW immediately internalizes it as a moral failing. She asks, "Is it because I've been bad?"
She gets so mad she literally crumbles her chocolate chip cookie in her fist.
And then you have Arthur's dad, who decides with the best of intention to create an authentic Bethlehem dinner.
No turkey, no pumpkin pie. He serves roast lamb with turmeric, unleavened bread, and pulse, an ancient Roman dish of mashed chickpeas and...
Arthur is having miserable visions of eating in a manger with camels. It's too much change. Arthur wants the familiar comfort of tradition.
Meanwhile, Buster is carrying an entirely different kind of psychological weight. His mother's divorce.
Mrs. Baxter is so terrified that Christmas won't be magical without Buster's father around that she overcompensates wildly.
She wakes Buster up at 6 a.m. on December 23rd, frantically making pancakes and putting out presents, convinced it's Christmas morning.
Buster has to gently put his own mother back to bed. He confesses to Arthur later that he's so exhausted by her manic anxiety that he sometimes wishes Christmas wasn't a big deal. He's entirely managing his parents' emotional fragility.
Why do holidays turn us into these stressed-out monsters? Muffy is the absolute worst offender in this episode.
She is throwing a massive catered extravaganza with a rock band called the Squabs and Artificial Snow.
She hands out invitations and ignores Francine exactly 28 separate times. When Francine explains she is Jewish and cannot come because her family is celebrating Hanukkah.
Muffy literally says it's not like Hanukkah is as important as Christmas.
Muffy's absolute refusal to decenter her own experience is staggering. She assumes her version of perfection is universal and mandatory.
Francine finally hangs up on her, establishing a hard boundary. It's a stark lesson in cultural respect and the arrogance of assumed norms.
But the antidote to all this manufactured stress is found in Arthur's shopping trip. He wants to buy his dad this infomercial gadget, the Veinator, that chops and juliennes for $5.90.
But it's sold out. The clerk tries to sell him an olive pitter instead.
the olive pitter, Arthur realizes you can't force the perfect gift. He pivots and buys a glass bird for his mom, replacing one he broke months.
It costs $9.59. He waits in a massive, exhausting line just to get it.
And the real joy of the episode comes from a mistake. The family sits down to watch Uncle Fred's video Christmas card from Florida and Hawaii.
It's chaotic, Rory. The dog is eating things. The camera falls over.
It is entirely imperfect, but it makes the whole family erupt and laugh. It proves that authentic connection is often born from the messy, imperfect, not
precise. Which brings us to the final narrative arc. We need to examine how the show addresses the immense power of language.
We've looked at actions and environments, but we need to look at how words are weaponized intentionally as bullying and how they're discovered accidentally as swear.
Let's look at the bullying episode first, because it flips the typical dynamic on its head.
This one is genuinely tough to watch, because the bully isn't Binky, the tough kid, or the Tibble twins, the menaces of preschool.
The bully is Arthur, the titular, usually highly moral character.
Sue Ellen receives a cherished yak wool sweater from her Tibetan pen pal, Tenzin, in Dharamshala. She is so proud of it, it makes her feel deeply connected to Himalayas.
She wears it to school, and Arthur makes a passing joke that she looks like a sheepdog. At first, Sue Ellen laughs, just a joke.
But the joke doesn't stop. Arthur relentlessly repeats the pun.
This raises an important question for the young audience. When does a joke stop being?
It crosses the line into bullying the exact second the target stops laughing.
Arthur tapes a drawing of Sue Ellen with a dog's body to her locker, writing, "Happy Sheepdog Appreciation Day."
He entirely strips the sweater of its cultural and emotional significance and turns it into a relentless object of public.
And even when Mr. Ratburn pulls Arthur aside and explains that this is bullying, Arthur is completely defensive. He says, "I didn't bully Sue Ellen. It was just a joke."
Ratburn forces him to write an apology letter. Arthur sits at the sugar bowl and writes the most toxic, victim-blaming non-apology ever put to her.
He writes, "I'm sorry you overreacted. I thought you could take a joke."
He literally blames her for being sensitive to his cruelty.
It is the textbook definition of a narcissistic non-apology. He is protecting his own ego by invalidating her reality.
But the social consequences are immediate and severe. Francine, Muffy, and even Buster read the note and completely abandoned. They refused to sit with him at lunch.
Arthur is baffled. He doesn't understand that an apology requires taking ownership of the pain caused, not debating the validity of the victim's feelings.
He is suffering from cognitive dissonance. He believes he is a good kid, therefore his act cannot be bad.
He even emails her another edited photo, doubling down on the cruelty because his ego feels threatened.
The wake-up call is brutal. Arthur is walking by the school's donation bin and sees Sue Ellen throwing the beloved yak wool sweater away.
She says, "Now when I look at that sweater, I only think about how mean people."
Arthur finally gets it. He sees the tangible destruction his words caused. He pulls the sweater out, finds her the next day, and delivers a real apology.
He admits he was a bully, admits he didn't realize how much he hurt her, and promises to wear the itchy sweater himself to prove he's sorry.
She laughs, tells him he looks like a giant mouse, and forgives. It's a masterful lesson on the anatomy of an authentic apology.
And finally, we look at the power of words discovered accidentally, the infamous swearing it.
The framing device is hilarious. Arthur breaks the fourth wall on the set of a mobster TV show parody called The Alto, explaining how television uses a bleep to cover words you aren't supposed to hear.
But in the narrative itself, DW discovers a swear word in the wild.
It is so funny. DW is in a crystal shop with Grandma Thora, who is buying a bowl for her friend F. DW overhears a teenage boy arguing with his mom because he can't go to a concert.
The teenager yells a swear word, we hear a bleep, and his mother is so profoundly shocked she drops the glass bowl she's holding, and it shatters on the floor.
DW, using her toddler logic, deduces that this word has magical physical power. She thinks the word literally causes adults to drop.
He treats the word like an incantation. This goes back to toddler linguistics. Children are learning that language commands their environment, saying milk gets them milk.
So why wouldn't a special forbidden word command adults?
When she asks her imaginary friend Nadine, Nadine doesn't know either. So she asks the Tibble twin, the chaotic forces of the preschool.
And the Tibbles, sensing an opportunity for psychological mischief, lie to her.
They tell her the word is a secret code that turns adults into zombie slaves for a day, making them obey your every command.
It's the ultimate fantasy of power for a powerless toddler. So DW sets up a surveillance operation.
She uses binoculars from Arthur's room to spy on her neighbor, trying to trick him into saying it.
But then we hit the climax. DW is called down for dinner. He keeps ignoring her mom, yelling, "Just a minute."
Her mom says her dinner is getting cold. Frustrated, DW drops the nuclear option. She marches out and yells the swear word directly at her own mother.
The reaction from the mother is swift, but incredibly measured. She doesn't scream or fly into a rage, which would have only reinforced DW's belief that the word holds chaotic, uncontrollable magic.
Instead, that night, she calmly sits on DW's bed and methodically strips the word of its power.
She explains that she won't punish DW because DW didn't know what it meant, but she explains the truth. The word doesn't make things brave, and it certainly doesn't control mine.
It simply means, I want to hurt your feelings.
I want to hurt your feelings. It completely deflates DW's fascination. Why would she want a word that's sad?
It demystifies the taboo entirely, and that is the brilliance of this series as a whole.
It takes these massive, overwhelming psychological concepts, the absolute finality of death, the terror of a cancer diagnosis, the anxiety of a natural disaster, the isolation of a stutter, the insidious nature of gaslighting, and the weaponization of language,
and scales them down perfectly to the eye level of an 8-year-old.
So what does this all mean? We've spent the last hour looking at aardvarks, bunnies, and monkeys, navigating the absolute darkest parts of the human experience.
They taught an entire generation about the nuance of an authentic apology, the necessity of sitting in the silence of grief, and the reality that life moves on like a persistent toad in a tin can.
It means that children are far more capable of processing complexity and pain than adults often give them credit for.
They don't need a padded room, they need a trusted guide.
Exactly. Which leaves me with a final thought for you to mull over. If a children's cartoon from decades ago could trust its young audience to process cancer, the trauma of 9/11, and PTSD such clinical grade, what does it say about today's media?
That's a great question.
With algorithms heavily favoring sanitized, fast-paced, frictionless content, are we actually protecting kids today? Or are we simply leaving them without a roadmap for the muddy, complicated waters of the real world they inevitably have to grow up in?